Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Contractor Evolution. This is Benji, and today's conversation is about how to devise a social media strategy for your construction or trades business. Social media is often shoved off to already busy employees who half it or just don't have the time. And I get it. As a contractor, making Instagram posts probably feels a little beneath you. You've got better stuff to do. Maybe it feels a little young for you. I know sometimes it does for me. And this is exactly why a fully formed strategy is so important. It gives you something to hand off to someone else on your team so that they can find success with it. Jonathan Kaur, our guest today, is the founder of Customer Growth, a contractor-focused social media agency. He advises and consults with seven-figure and eight-figure businesses, dialing in their social media strategies to deliver actual business results you can measure. So today, we answer a few questions. With so many content creators, so many distractions, so many platforms, is social media even still worth investing in? How do you devise a simple strategy that actually works, that someone other than you can execute on? And lastly, what should your posts even be about? Who should be capturing and where should they be stored? We answer this and a ton more. So without further ado, let's dive in with Jonathan.
You're watching Contractor Evolution, where we unpack the systems, tactics, and skills you need to take your fast-growing contracting business to the next level.
You're here to learn what it takes to scale up, work less, and increase profitability. You've come to the right place.
Stay tuned to learn what separates the new breed of contractor from the old school, and welcome to your ultimate guide on the business of contracting.
Jonathan, welcome to Contractor Evolution. Thanks for doing this with us, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's just trying to end the week strong and hopefully have a really good conversation about social media content and for contractors.
Yeah, thanks, man. So here's kind of an obvious question. I have a feeling I know what you're going to say to the answer, but I'd like you to maybe give us the layers or the nuance behind this. One thing I've certainly seen or heard from members is this, is it still worth investing in social media? These platforms have become so unbelievably saturated. The content universe feels a little bit overwhelming. I wouldn't know where to start. Maybe on some level there's a belief system like it's too late for me. So that's the question. In 2024, is it still worth investing resources, time, and potentially even dollars, potentially even some key hires into a social media strategy? Why or why not?
Yeah, so I think the answer right away is yes, and I'll kind of break down specifically why I get there. The first piece is most contractors are actually not on social media. That's I for the past few years kind of advocating and building demand for social media. I still run into a lot of people who obviously have their resistance towards it, whether it's they want to be private about their company or just honestly just feel like there is no merit or need for it in their company. And so there's a lot of resistance I've been met with. And so even to just seeing a lot of companies that I'd never heard of, and I'll Google them or look them up on, even their website, they have no social media. So I think that's the first thing. It's just most contractors have no social media. So in my opinion, I think that creates a blue ocean opportunity for any contractor. The second piece though is for the contractors that do have social media, at least let's say they have an Instagram or a Facebook or LinkedIn, they aren't posting any content. So they have the pages, great, but they aren't posting content. And then the next level after that is not only, obviously it would go for the contractors that are posting content, they aren't doing it consistently. So they may, there may be little seasons of waves, especially, maybe during the downtimes like this winter season right now, they might be posting a little bit more, but then as, the spring and summer begin to ramp up, people, kind of neglected, especially if they have no process or system in place for that. And then the last piece with that is for the contractors that are posting content and posting content consistently, a majority are not posting good content, to be honest. A lot of the content I see, especially for contractors, typically kind of is more on the side of being very salesy. Like, hey, look at us, look how amazing we are. These are the services we offer. So the reality is it's more of a pitch slap on social media versus adding value, whether it's to educational content, informational kind of updating about projects, or even kind of the entertainment side, which I feel like is more of a resistance for contractors in general. And so kind of going through that evolution of where different contractors are at in different stages, I think there's definitely an opportunity for a lot of contractors to, one, come on social media, post good content, and post good content consistently. So
from a very first principles thinking mindset, like why, and you've given us some reasons, but like what is social media fundamentally good for? And are there misconceptions around that? I mean, I think the pushback from people who are not all in on this, or who are sort of doing it half or 40% what they could do, they may be confused about like the actual explicit purpose of having a really strong Instagram, a really strong TikTok, a really strong Facebook presence or LinkedIn presence, what have you. So we'll get into how someone can define their own strategy for their own business, but just more broadly, like what is social media good for?
Yeah, I think this kind of begins to go into the social media strategy, which I know we'll unpack here soon. But I think the biggest thing is really just understanding what your objective or goal is. Because the way I look at social media, kind of like you were saying from a first principle standpoint, is the reason you do social media and really the reason you do marketing, all of it is all attributed back to your business objectives. It's not like you're just marketing as one silo within your company. You just do it just to do it. No, it's like what sort of business goals or objectives do you have that you are going to use marketing, whether it's social media, SEO, video content, all that sort of stuff,
right,
to be able to help you reach those goals. And so there's typically 3 goals that any contractor can achieve. The first one is brand awareness, just getting your name out there, getting exposure. And especially when it comes to brand, a good way of thinking about it is just your reputation within the market. The second piece is more of a lead gen play. Which, in my opinion, builds from kind of building an actual brand and getting more brand awareness. But lead gen can definitely be an objective for contractors as far as why they should push on social media. And then the third piece is kind of more like the recruitment type efforts, or like obviously trying to hire talent and attract people in the industry. And there's like a stat out there that says about like, I think it's like 40% of people in the industry are going to retire by 2030. And so obviously there's already a labor shortage now, but it will only get more and more worse and more competitive. And so for contractors to not only win the projects, but to be able to have the actual resources through people to actually, do the projects is going to be incredibly important. So those are kind of the 3 whys. Yeah. And there's obviously overlap. You don't have to necessarily separate them. They can build off each other, but that's the way I would look at it.
Okay. And can you just tell us what's wrong with sort of just posting? Like, in other words, like, why do we need to actually fully bake and fully think through, in a holistic fashion, a bona fide social media strategy? If someone said, yeah, it just seems like work. I got pictures. I can write some captions. Let me just fire some stuff up there. Like, what's the risk in doing that?
You're wasting your time. I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, in my opinion, if a contractor was just doing something half-heartedly, or just, having an intern or some sort of random admin just handle it, who doesn't, first want to do it, but 2, knows how to do it and build it and scale it, I would just say just don't do any social media at all. And I think that's the biggest thing, is just a waste of resources, waste of time. And if you allocate money towards it, and it could even be human capital, like you could be paying somebody X amount of dollars per hour, they could be doing other things that might be far more productive. So that's the reason why I think it's important to know, like, to not just post a post, because if you're doing that, honestly, I feel like that can actually impact your brand more. And the example I have is I just talked to a construction executive from Boston yesterday. We were on a call, and he had mentioned how he kind of, there's certain contractors that he follows, and he kind of gets their rhythm, or like the structure, the templatized nature of their content. And he told me, he's like, honestly, when I see their content, I kind of zone out and like just scroll past it. And as it relates to like putting any sort of marketing out there, that's the last thing you'd want to hear from any sort of audience or people that are consuming your content. So I think that's what it comes down to, is just not wasting resources, but also to not even hurting your brand if you're doing it bad.
Okay, so we're gonna get in. There's kind of like a multi-point framework we're gonna go through that I think is like highly functional and pretty easy to understand. This is not as complicated or as intimidating as I think people think. So I'm looking forward to that. But first, let's talk wardrobe. Okay, so guys, wardrobe provided today by Joe Hayes with Hayes Window Restoration. So these guys have a pretty interesting little business. They specialize in repair and restoration of original wood windows, specifically on homes from the 1950s. They've been members for just over a year, since the fall of 2022. They work with Coach Shane Bannerman, based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Go Vikings. One big challenge that Joe is working on right now is trying to secure a new shop space to grow their storm window millwork and finishing process into. I was looking at some photos and checking out their website. It's quite technical work. It is something you can't just do it on the job site from a ladder. Like, these windows often have to come off, go to the shop, go through an entire process. So they need more room for that. And then a big win for them, I was talking to him about this at Summit, identifying the need to invest in employee training and development. This is what he said. We've made this a theme for 2024 and are enjoying the process of identifying areas of growth for individual employees so we can invest in them and help them succeed with us over the long term. Any comments, any advice for Joe, Jonathan?
One, I think it's awesome that he's really has that focus to be able to build processes for his business. Like, I think that's arguably the most important thing as it relates to duplicating yourself. Because as a business owner, your goal is to be able to empower as many people and equip them to be able to do a great job. And if anything, a better job than what you were doing or handling before. And so I think investing in your processes is honestly super commendable. So hat tip to him.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Joe. Appreciate the shirt and the hat. If you want to work with like 600 other amazing contractors like Joe Hayes, you want to check out Breakthrough Academy. We'll put a link somewhere on the screen. If you need help systemizing, if you need some advice, if you need a community, that's what we're here for. So, okay, let's get into the strategy side of this. Now, before we dive into the steps, there were two things we were talking about offline that I almost consider this as like prep work. One is like a social media audit, and then the other is a competitive analysis. Can you just kind of tell us the why and the how on those two things, the social media audit and the competitive analysis?
Yeah, so I'll describe it as the way I approach it with contractors, and then also to just kind of share some tips as far as how contractors can do this themselves. But anytime I work with a contractor, my goal is to be able to understand, okay, what are you guys currently doing, especially if they have an established presence on social media, is to be able to understand, okay, what are you doing? What's working really well? Why? Obviously making some potential conclusions on that. And then what's not working, and either what can we improve, tweak, or even pivot away from. And so I think that's important, especially too, if you're just starting up again, or just looking to revamp your strategy. Because sometimes it's easy to just go versus kind of looking at, okay, let's actually take a step back and see what's actually working, what's not, and how we improve it. That's kind of step one to it. The second piece, though, is also trying to get a competitive analysis, get a competitive understanding of what are other contractors, whether it's direct competitors or competitors in other areas that obviously wouldn't be a direct competitor, but is doing the same line of work as you're doing. And I think it's important to be able to gauge kind of the same framework for that. It's like, okay, what are they doing really well and why? And then what areas is there potentially an opportunity for us to be able to level up or be able to do a better job than what they're doing, and even take some inspiration from some of the things that they're doing really well. So it's important to do kind of both of these things, just so you understand, okay, where's everything? Where am I at? Where's the industry as a whole at? And then how does that kind of lead into basically what we're going to be going into, the social media strategy, and basically take a lot of those insights to be able to, begin hitting the ground running.
And what are you doing with that information from the competitive analysis? Like, are you just trying to zig while they zag? Like, are you trying to find ways for distinction, things that you can be different on? Are you looking to mimic what they're doing? Like, what's kind of the outcome? Why do you do that?
Yeah, so the competitive analysis, honestly, just to see, I think it's honestly finding areas of opportunity where you can stick out and separate and differentiate yourself as a contractor. But also, too, at the same time, though, is there might be some contractors out there that are doing a really good job. It's like, how do we take inspiration, not necessarily copy and paste, but how do we take inspiration for our own content, and even to find ways to maybe even level it up, whether it's production value or, time that you're taking on the content. So,
let's get into these questions. So the way that let me just set this up for the listeners. Like, we were kind of hashing this out last week, Jonathan, and you kind of gave me this really, really useful list of questions that we need to ask, reflect on, and answer for ourselves. And from the answers, there's gonna be a very, very clear play to be made on social media in terms of what we're posting, why we're posting it, where we're posting it, how often, who's replying to the comments, etc. It's very holistic. So the questions, and we'll go through each. The questions are why, who, what, where, when, and how. So let's spend a few minutes on each. Like let's start with this why question, and I'll just hand it over to you.
Yeah, so the why question is kind of something I already covered, which like I said, it's always relating back to your business goals. Like for example, with Joe, obviously he wants to improve processes. So like if that's a business objective, how do we relate that back to marketing or social media? I don't think there's a direct parallel there, but obviously, typically any company has at least a growth opportunity, like as far as like how much revenue they want to be able to increase or headcount. And so as it relates to maybe more along that lines, like how do we figure out what our goal is? Do we want to get more projects, or do we want to get more people, or do we want to get a mixture of both? And so I think that's where it falls into kind of the three core buckets as far as why you're posting. Is it brand awareness, to be able to just have your brand out there, begin to build obviously differentiate yourself from other contractors, but also to just build the brand in general, and even too, if you've never done that in the past, be able to like tell your story through content. So that's one piece, which is the brand awareness piece. The other piece, obviously, is the lead gen. Is like, okay, what types of clients are you looking to target on social media? And as it relates to obviously getting your target audience, and I know at least for more home builders or more of the residential side, you're obviously, I would definitely say like more of the Instagram route, from what I've heard from other contractors, is typically a good avenue or path for that. And then the third piece is really the recruitment or employer brand side, which really has to do with attracting talent, whether it's in the field, people obviously boots on the ground, or even individuals like project managers, estimators, and everything in between.
And what if someone said, well, those all sound great, I want all of them?
Yeah. I definitely think you can build from all of them. I think the biggest piece though is you definitely want to understand which one's like the high level one, and then like basically what's the primary,
And then
secondary, and
secondaries.
tertiary, and then you would adjust, accordingly.
Okay. So you need to you may want all those things, but you do need to pick a primary lane that you're more focused on. Okay.
Yep, exactly. Like for example, like I was talking to an excavation grading company in Alabama, and I asked them, hey, like, what are you looking to accomplish from a social media standpoint? And they say, Jonathan, I have enough as work as it is. Things are going well in that way. We're building process, all this sort of stuff. I just want to be able to, one, get my brand out there, but mainly it's like I want to be able to hire and like make hiring easier for me, because it's really tough because not a lot of people know who I am. I've been around for some time now, but I just haven't had a brand or any sort of presence out there. So I want to get out there, but mainly I want to improve my recruiting efforts. And so the goal is that as we begin to build out that strategy, it's like, okay, cool. We definitely know we're going to lean more on the side of the people type content, which could be spotlights, could be testimonials, could be anything that just humanizes the brand, that really communicates, hey, like culture and those sort of topics.
Are there any one of these three options, brand awareness, lead gen, or recruitment, that are maybe like less conducive to these platforms? Like I'm sort of wondering like how effective Instagram, just to pick one, would be for lead gen. I mean, people are not going, you got to look at the behavior and the psychology around the user of the app. What are they there to do? They're there to look at their friends' pictures from the camping trip. They're there to check out a few stories. They're there to get in a disagreement with someone about politics or something. Like they're like, are they there to buy a home? Or are they there to even consider buying a home or getting their windows fixed or whatever? Like is that lead gen one, or are there others that are maybe less conducive to the nature of the platform?
Yeah. So for me, my opinion is I would never want to take a lead gen approach, even if I wanted to generate leads for my company. And I think, and I typically correlate like lead gen strategy with like direct response. Like, hey, like here, this is going to be like the copy and all of this, all of this is going to be set up to be able to pitch you something. And honestly, what I've realized even through my own personal brand is the less I sell and the more value I add, the more I educate, the more I inform, the more I entertain, has a natural ability to actually prompt people to reach out. And if you look at any of my posts, I never say contact me to schedule a call or work with my company, blah blah. But the idea that I'm adding value within the market, because I agree, I log on to social media to learn, to be entertained, or to be for all these different reasons. But it's not to be sold. But it's honestly really interesting that your ability, and I would say from a contractor standpoint, as it relates to Instagram, It really has to do more with like storytelling. How do you bring the reader in? How do you get them like picturing, whether it's like a remodel or like a specific service that you're offering? How do you get them to desire that for themselves and see themselves in that shoe? And I think that's where copywriting, I think, is incredibly important. And so I'll have like different hooks that I use for content, and I'll say things along the lines of, imagine this, or what if, and I'll get them just thinking about these things. And so the lead gen, in my opinion, I would definitely not do that if it means direct response. But I think as you build brand and just tell this holistic story of your company, I think it has a natural way to build trust and affinity towards your brand, which ultimately leads people to reach out and say, hey, I want to learn more. I like the content you're posting.
So you actually would when you're working with clients and they come to you and they say, "Hi, I want to get Instagram, but man, I'm not going to do this if I'm not getting 100 leads a year off of this thing." Are you literally coaching them away from that mindset? Are you said my opinion is, and you shared that. So is that indeed sort of like is your philosophy something that you encourage other people to adopt? Because I've got my own thoughts on it, but I just want to make sure that's what you're saying. It's like this maybe isn't the best tool for direct response or lead gen.
Yeah. So if a contract, so I'll start off by saying this: if a contractor say, "Hey, I want 100 leads, all this sort of stuff by the end of the year," I would be like, "Yeah, I don't think we can work together. I don't think social media organic specifically is built for that." I'm not saying you can't get customers, but it's very different from something like paid media, which to describe paid media, it's like Facebook ads, Google ads, LinkedIn ads, like any sort of ad-based platform or performance marketing, some other people would call it. I would say that is far more easier to quantify. Hey, if we put $1 in and we know we're going to get, $3, $4, $5 out. So I think that's a lot easier to track and measure, because that ads are constantly hitting a specific, based on your budget, based on parameters that you have set within the dashboard, or like the ads manager, as they say. That's a lot easier to be able to quantify, and even from a direct response standpoint. So like, let's say you are doing offering a specific service. I would go that, and if a contractor wanted results right now, I would definitely advise them to go that route, the paid media route. But if they want to build brand and then allow for something that eventually won't, like, because here's the example I use. I just talked about this yesterday with a friend who's a content creator, Alex Hermosi, which for those of you that don't know, he's a big content creator in the industry. He spends, and if he leads with this, he says he spends about $80,000 a month for content, for his content team. And he reaches, I think it's 200 plus million impressions per month from his content. Now, but this is all 100% organic content that he's posting. He said if he had to pay Facebook or Google or some other platform for the same amount of reach that he's getting now, he said he would have to pay a little bit over $1.3 million a month. So you equate $1 million a month to 80,000, it looks a lot less. And I think that's where the power of organic reach is for contractors. But you have to be patient. You have to build it. You have to refine it and grow it over time. But if you want results now, I would definitely go the paid media route.
There are better tools for that job. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. That's been our experience too. When you try to force the conversion off of a platform or a content type that it's not precisely built for, you can still get a result, but you ultimately it's a square peg in a round hole thing. It's like, if you are truly after leads, go watch some webinars on how to launch a Facebook campaign, or how to do Instagram ads, or how to do pay-per-click or whatever. And that's there for you. But if you want to build a brand, tell a story, create an emotional connection with your audience, that is what this tool is the best for. So I think it's an important distinction. Having said that, I will say this. I mean, we have a member, we had him on, Sean Wolford. We had him on earlier in the year, and he gets, his business is like $2 million a year in renovations in Edmonton, and he does, and 70% of the leads come straight from his Instagram. Now, having said that, he is not on every single story pitching. He's just telling jokes. He's showing his job sites. Occasionally, he'll say, for an estimate, do this. It's very, very, very light touches when it comes to trying to force a conversion. But I think the success he's had is not because he's approached it with a lead gen attitude. He's approached it with a brand awareness and sort of a fun storytelling attitude, and the leads have followed kind of a result for good behavior. Okay, so that's the why thing. Figure out why you're doing this, and you're making the case that this thing is truly the best for those two pieces. Tell me about this who question. What are we trying to answer and figure out there?
Yeah. So the who really falls under two categories. One of them is clients, and then the other one is employees. And I think the client, you can even kind of like go a little bit more specific. You have existing clients and you have prospective clients. And then same thing with employees. You have existing employees and potential employees. From the client side, obviously, in my opinion, I think it's important to be able to stay, like, for example, for me, when I'm posting my own content and even too, as I'm posting for other contractors, it's important, like, you can only call up a contractor. Let's say you did a project with them in the past. And then maybe you want to see if there's more opportunity to do business with them again for whatever reason, depending on what service you offer. There's only so many times you can pick up the phone and say, "Oh, hey, how do you need help?" or send them an email or constantly email blast them. And that's where I think it's important to stay top of mind with existing clients or maybe even clients that you've worked with in the past that's been a while. So it's just from that standpoint, you obviously want to be able to post content and target them, or even too, maybe you're trying to go more broad and obviously expand your reach to be able to reach potentially new clients. Who have never heard of you or maybe heard of you, but just haven't learned much from afar. So I would say that's one bucket is a client, but the other piece, which I'd already covered, is you need the actual workers or help to be able to get the job done for these clients. And so to be able to tell a boats, like basically be able to target them from that standpoint, to be able to show you're a great place to work, you're building a great culture, you have a great team, you're doing incredible projects. As it relates to not contractors, but employees reaching out to you, that helps you make a case as far as people taking a gamble on your company. Because at the end of the day, obviously they have, in my opinion, I think the labor market is wide open and anybody can work anywhere they want, because I would say the workers are far more in demand than there are contractors out there. So.
And how does understanding both that ideal client profile and then that ideal candidate profile, how does that inform the strategy? Is it dictating the photos that you post, the captions that you write? Can you maybe just go a little bit deeper on this? Because I get what you're saying. It's okay, this is great for two audiences and you want to know your market and that's important. Yeah. But like let's be very practical here. Like give us an example of how understanding hey, my ideal worker is like this age, they live in these parts of towns, they follow these other brands. Like how might that understanding change what you do on socials?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I'll give an example of a post I did recently that got good engagement for a client of mine. And when he first started, and most contractors, especially too, when they're posting a hiring, like, hey, we're hiring for this role, they'll always use the phrase, we're looking for a rock star. Like, we're looking for a rock star employee. And they'll use that typically, in my opinion, I think it's just jargon to not know. You just want somebody who will just do whatever it takes and all sorts of stuff, which I think is fine. But I made a post for a contractor saying, hey, the headline was, we don't hire rock stars. And basically the copy was basically going down the line of like, here's why, here's what we've experienced. Typically they work more siloed, like we're more integrated of a team. Typically they go and make their own processes. We already have an established process. So basically I'm describing the ideal type of person that works at this company through the copy, through the content that I'm creating for them. So that's kind of an example of the employee side. Is like, hey, like, what types of people do really well in your company and why? And how do you spell that out, or how do you tell that in an interesting way that captivates people's attention? The other piece, though, from the client side is the partnership standpoint. So obviously I work more on the B2B side, commercial side for construction. And obviously it's incredibly relationship based, and one client you can work for 20 years because, you have a lot of different projects with them. But from that standpoint, so I have another contractor that I work with, and we have posts here and there. Like, it's not super often, but we'll say, hey, here's the type of partnership that we do really well with. Here's the type of contractor that we're with. Here's why. And more specifically, like from a subcontractor standpoint, especially if they're working with a GC, we like to be seen as a partner and not just another vendor, or not just another sub. And here's why. And here's the benefits as it relates to working a project together. And so it's getting more specific, less about like saying, okay, this is like we're looking for this type of customer or whatever, and it more has to do like, what types of individuals or companies do you do really well with, and why, and kind of spelling that out, and obviously saying it in a compelling manner. But those are like two examples, I guess, for each of them as far as how you would approach that.
Yeah. I'm thinking of an example of one of our members who actually lives not far from you in Seattle, and they operate there, and they do exterior maintenance. So like pressure washing, window cleaning, gutter cleaning, stuff like that. He knows that his average sort of ideal candidate for a labor position is generally younger, early 20s. They may be in school, they may be fresh out of school. They're usually looking for summer gigs. And then he also started to learn. It's like these young men and women tend to be very, very outdoorsy. You know, we get like Pacific Northwest, it's rugged. There's lots of climbing, there's lots of mountain biking, there's lots of hiking, there's tons of trails, there's skiing in the winter. And he used a lot of that imagery and a lot of videos like that of him and his team up at the ski hill, him and his team like doing a tough bouldering route or whatever. Like he would, he went out of his way to really capture the essence of the people that work on his team and mirrored that on his Instagram, and it's worked really, really well. We did an episode with him last week, completely solved a really serious recruiting challenge in his business as a result. But I just think that whole idea is very important of thinking through who are our ideal clients, who are our ideal employees, is this content catered to them? I'd also make the case, like if I were to launch an Instagram for a business tomorrow, I'd actually focus more on the team side of it, the recruitment side of it, because I think my personal opinion is that the potential clients are going to love that anyway. They're going to be like, "Oh, this is so cute. They look after their people. They really care. They give awards. They're doing employee spotlights. They're giving words of encouragement, etc." And I actually think by focusing on that one, you kind of get all the benefits anyway. My personal opinion. But okay, let's move on. The next question, we've done the why, we've done the who, then it's the what. So maybe unpack this for us.
Yeah. So the what is what content are we going to post? So now that we know why we're posting and now we understand who it is we're targeting, either clients or employees, what are we going to actually put out there? And for me, I use a very simple framework. It's basically three buckets. So the first one is people, the second one is projects, and then the third one is purpose. And so from the people side, obviously we had given examples like there's employee spotlights, maybe there's anniversaries, there's awards. Basically, the people spotlight helps more on the culture, kind of brand awareness side of it. But also too, it builds affinity for the brand, because I agree, like from a client perspective, it helps them to see, oh wow, like this is not only because normally most contractors will hide behind a website or social media with no people in it, and there's kind of a disconnect there. But when somebody sees a face, it really like allows for people to connect. And in my opinion, that's why even to content that has a face or some sort of like versus like the ones that are just like commentating with, some sort of like B-roll doesn't work as well as somebody actually talking directly to camera. So that's the people side. The project side is obviously there's normally most contractors will typically just say, hey, here's a completed project, but I think there's definitely different stages of the project. The first one obviously is when, the groundbreaking, which is what we would say depending on the type of build. But obviously there's the start of the construction, there's during the construction, and then there's post construction. And so I think it's just being able to highlight the phases and obviously the stages that you're at on a consistent basis, create for really compelling content. Because obviously the people side is incredibly important, but what contractors are building or working on is also just as fascinating. And then the last piece is purpose, which really has to do, in my opinion, I feel like that's the bigger differentiator for contractors. Because Benji, I'm sure you've talked to different contractors, and if you were to ask them what makes you different, most will be like, we're quality workers, we do things on time, on budget, we're integrous. Like they'll use the same phrases that we hear all the time. But the reality, I feel like that's where the third bucket, the purpose, really plays an important role, because it has to do with your mission, your vision, your core values, your culture, your leadership style, all these like basically the identity or the brand kind of identity or makeup of who you are and why you do things the way you do. And so obviously, like I mentioned, it's covering content about your core values, but not necessarily talking about your core value directly, saying, hey, here's our core value and why. It's more showing like, hey, here's an individual who's living out a core value, or here's a story that happened and how somebody ended up actually going above and beyond, and it relates back to the type of culture we have. And so when you have those three buckets, And I'm sure that there are more things you can add, like safety, mental health, all these sort of things. But for me, that framework is an easy way to be able to build a content strategy, or just like buckets for content, as far as how you would approach posting content on a consistent basis. From that standpoint, I do have one thing I want to share, but I just want to let you jump in case there's any
Well,
questions.
I wondered if you had any examples of anything really clever, really thoughtful, anything that had really good engagement under this idea of purpose. Like what are people posting? What are they saying? What are they trying to communicate under that bucket?
Yeah. So one example, like, and even two, is like advocating for the trades. So like, there's contractors out there who are more open about
Yeah, that's an easy
saying, hey,
angle.
like, yeah. And so the example I have actually this week, I reshared a Mike Rowe post. It was like a clip, and I ended up adding some copy, all that sort of stuff on Facebook for a contractor I'm working with here, and the post went viral. I'd never seen anything go this crazy. I think it was like 18 or 17,000 likes. It was like 14,000 reshares, and it just popped off. But I think the biggest thing here, it's definitely a very he definitely was kind of, I don't know if he was bashing against directly about colleges, but he was definitely advocating for the trades. And so that's an example of like a contractor, like this contractor specifically wants to be able to advocate and talk about, hey, more young people need to join the trades. And so that's an example as far as like things that maybe contractors are more passionate about. Another contractor might be more passionate about mental health. That's obviously a big problem in the industry as it relates to like, suicide rates and things like that. And so just depending on what they're most passionate about is you'll lean into more of that type of content in your company.
I have a little I say this with our marketing team, if you can make a post, and when I'm saying, okay, if you can create content, so that could be copywriting, it could be images, it could be video, it could be graphic design, it could be some combination of all three. But if the overarching message of that piece of content can get your audience to say, yeah, brother, and they kind of agree. They're like, that's what I thought. I've been saying that. Like you're tapping into this. I don't know how to describe it. There's a part of their psychology where they feel unseen, they feel misunderstood, they maybe feel looked down upon. And if you can sort of right the ship for them emotionally, so to speak, in the moment of that post, generally speaking, those things go through the roof almost every single time. That's a little hack. If you think they're gonna say, hell yeah, brother, that's probably a good post.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just that was a good little tangent on the purpose thing. What was the other thing that you were gonna add before we kind of got off track there?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember now. I can't remember off the top of my head, but kind of expanding on what you just mentioned there. I call those posts more like the hot takes posts. Is like,
Right.
hey, like this is a post that's either going to get somebody to really agree with you or really disagree. And whenever you have those posts, especially too for me, that different posts I've had on LinkedIn, those ones go viral and those ones pop off because one, you kind of have to be a little
Cheeky.
courageous to be able to put yourself out there. But two, also know that you might get backlash. And so I definitely have gotten different haters and people like that, which is totally fine. And people that disagree, I think the disagree part is fine. It's more when it becomes like a personal attack. It's like, okay, like you're pushing a little bit, but just be ready for that if you do take that kind of hot take approach.
The hot take approach. Any thoughts actually on sort of just dealing with negative comments or dealing with whatever, people being mean? Like a lot of people just say get over it. I wonder if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah. So what I do for my clients is pretty simple. Like if it's not helpful and if it's distracting, all sort of stuff, I'll just delete the comment. I think that's probably the easiest thing to do, especially on platforms maybe more like Facebook or even Instagram. Like it's just easier just to delete them and move on. And I have one contractor I work with where like there's this regular person that just kept saying negative things over and over again. So we'll just go in there and just block them. Like there's no time to like waste, I think, in my opinion. For me, with my own content, I'll go back and forth with the haters. I don't mind it, but as it relates to the company and the brand, I think it probably will do more harm than good if you respond or just take time, because sometimes people are not as reasonable as you would like on social media for whatever reason.
The next question is where, and I think this has to do with platform selection. So like in my mind, there's kind of a handful of big ones. There's Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Am I missing any? Are there any, like, is there a fifth or a sixth like big platform that I'm forgetting about, Jonathan?
Yeah. So some people would like kind of loop in, especially if you're going short form video, you go like YouTube Shorts.
Okay,
That's one.
let's not include you. I personally think YouTube is sort of a different thing.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
more of an educational platform. But
Yeah.
is there like another LinkedIn, another Instagram, or something I've just forgotten? Or those are the main ones: Facebook, TikTok, Insta.
Those are the main ones. But I think one that might be good for like home builders, residential side is Pinterest.
Okay.
I don't know too much about that. So if you ask me, I'm gonna be like, I don't know. But I've heard just other contractors who did leverage Pinterest and have landed clients.
So, okay, I just want to ask you, let's just zoom in on these four for a second. Like, I think the thing that's challenging, I find this, and I'm sure our listeners do too, it's like every other year there's some new platform that's popping off, and you'll have some content guru, or we have a marketing consultant that we work with who goes, you guys aren't on TikTok, you're crazy. The CPMs are so cheap. It's free eyeballs. You hear Gary Vaynerchuk droning on about it for hours. It's like, it's not that they're wrong. It's just like, it is exhausting. It's like, okay, well, I just figured out Instagram, and now you're telling me this is other thing I need to go figure out. It's probably going to be tempting to say, well, just do all of them. And maybe that is the answer, but I'm just going to ask you, like, can you tell us which ones on this list truly matter for this audience? And if so, which ones maybe matter less?
Yeah, I think the top one I would probably say is in Instagram for your audience specifically. Then I would say close second is Facebook. Yeah, I would say Facebook, and then probably TikTok after that, and then LinkedIn. I think there's utility for all of them, in my opinion. But just knowing from the home services, residential side, even to I have a buddy who's a luxury builder here. Him building his Instagram has helped him obviously land clients and all that sort of stuff, new opportunities. And, he's on Facebook. He's kind of diversified, like a little bit from that standpoint, but he knows that he has a lot more ROI on his investment on Instagram. And so like a good framework for this, honestly, and I saw somebody post this, so this isn't my idea per se, but it's like, post wherever your audience is at. So wherever your target audience is at, and obviously every contractor should know like who that is and the demographics and all the specific aspects. But once you figure out who that is, it's like, where are they? And then how do you just get in front of them and add value from that standpoint? And I think from this side, it is Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and then LinkedIn. The reason I wouldn't put TikTok higher is because, in my opinion, I feel like TikTok is more of an interest sort of awareness channel. I don't know anybody who's like gone, okay, let me go check, like, because I post content on TikTok myself too, but I've never seen anybody just they're there to be entertained, honestly, and so they'll follow.
Extremely young platform, like
extremely young platform.
We got to be clear here. Yeah. This is 16 to 24-year-olds. I think in the 60 or 80% of the audience is extreme. I mean, they're not buying home services, so that just needs to be said.
Yeah. And but in the future that
could change,
eventually mature. Totally. Yeah. So but I'm curious. You Benji, like you mentioned, you have your own thoughts. What do you think? Like, how would you rank your own list? Is it similar? Is it a little different, and why?
So if I was doing residential, I think Instagram and Facebook are the biggest ones. But if I was doing a lot of commercial work and it was more of a B2B environment, I'd actually bring LinkedIn up from the bottom, and that would maybe be second or third. I think Instagram sort of is number one for me in terms of which social media platforms are important. But building a bit of an audience on LinkedIn, if you're doing B2B work, it can be extremely powerful too. Is there something wrong? Like, again, it's always about the resource constraint. In a perfect world, you're making platform-specific posts and strategy, platform-specific content. In a realistic world, I don't know if most of our businesses are going to be resourced well enough to do that. Is there something wrong with just like, hey, I'm going to make posts, and we're going to post them basically on all the platforms, and maybe I have to change sort of like the the orientation of the image, the dimensions of the image to fit this platform versus that platform. I guess what I'm describing is kind of a spray and pray approach, where you're just sort of making one content type and disseminating on multiple different platforms. Is there something wrong with that?
No, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Just know that, and I think I'll say the caveat there though is if you have the right strategy, if you know like the content types and who you're targeting, all that sort of stuff, I think that's fine. Just be okay though, especially like for example, like the people, projects, purpose buckets. Typically, from a B2B standpoint, like commercial side, like LinkedIn will honestly pop off a lot more versus like the Facebook or Instagrams for like that specific demographic or type of contractor. And so I think it's just being realistic and being okay with, hey, maybe some of this content just might not hit as much on those like specific platforms that may not resonate as much. Just be okay with that. And honestly, like the people, I feel like the people type content is pretty universal. Like anywhere you put it, people like that, people eat it up. But it's more once you start to get outside of that realm, that's where maybe you'll see fluctuations. So I think it's just being okay with that is just a thing to note.
Okay. Okay, so let's talk about the when questions. I think this has to do with like frequency and time of day.
Yeah. So as far as when contractors, well, I'll start off with like how often you should actually post content. I think at a minimum, you should be at least having one post per week, and that's not factoring in extra things, especially for like Instagram. Like if you could do like 1 to 3 stories, that's great. Like, and you don't have to overthink it. You could just even do like just a snapshot of the project, or maybe there's something that you want to share. That's not including that, but I would definitely say one post per week at a minimum from that standpoint. And then it's another thing I say is like I honestly lean more on the side of quality content over quantity. And it's interesting because you'll hear the Gary V's, you'll hear the Alex Hormozy say like, hey, like just go quantity, just get things out there, all that sort of stuff. And I'm okay when you're doing this full time and this is what you live and breathe. But if you're a contractor, I would honestly lean on the side of just focusing on how to make each post the best post you can versus creating 5 posts that are okay, mediocre, maybe they were like half baked and now you're posting it. I would honestly lean on that side because I actually made this mistake myself years ago. Like I was posting, I think it was 2-3 years ago, I was posting 5 times per day on LinkedIn, no engagement, nothing, like no comments or anything. But I decided, I'm like, okay, well, let me scale my content back and let me just do 2 posts per week, take the same amount of time I would take for 5 posts, but instead up level each of these posts. My engagement started increasing. More people started, engaging because the actual thoughtfulness and time I took to it was there. So I would definitely say at a minimum once per week. But if you see opportunity for you to sustain either the level of quality that you have or even make it better, then continue to add more and more from there. Versus I've talked to contractors who are like, I want to post twice a day, 7 days. I'm like, don't start there. Like that's a sure way to, crash and burn and honestly tarnish your brand. So
the advice I've gotten is you want to post as much as you can without sacrificing quality. And I just think that that's like a nice, easy sentence to understand. I would actually comment here on a bit of a distinction between what the Hormozys and the Gary V's and the Ed Milet's and sort of like these big content, the Tony Robbins, like these content gods, if you will. The advice they're giving is sound advice. It's great advice, but it's also not particularly tailored for this audience. You got to think about it. Like usually they're advising B2B, they're advising other content creators, and their business model is to create content, build an audience so they can monetize the audience. So it's like that's a very, very different set of incentives than a builder who wants to maybe grow some brand affinity. You got to understand that like the distinction there is like, one is I need as much traffic as possible so that I can sell to this traffic and I can monetize this. The other is what the hell is a home builder going to do with 100,000 followers? That's my question. Unless they're like, a national brand, and good for them if they are. But most of our listeners are going to be a local business. They're going to be $1 to $10 million a year. What the hell are you going to do with 100,000 followers, 1 million followers? Like there's a certain point where it's like your business is just not equipped to handle that. So in your case, really what that's very, very good for, I think, is kind of a sales nurture tool. Like people, where people they're going to check you out before you arrive for the estimate or after you go home for the estimate. They're going to check you out somewhere near that bottom of funnel consideration stage, which is why I would say you want the grid to look nice. You want the post to be thoughtful. If there's a story there when that prospect happens to check, great. If there's not, no big deal. So that's why I think some of that sort of heavy duty quantity advice is maybe not the soundest for our specific type of business. Would you
for
agree
sure.
with
No.
that, or is that maybe a hot take that's totally incorrect?
No, I think that's a good way of saying it. And the other thing I was thinking about as you were saying that is because I know because I get these messages from my clients, like from managing their profiles, is like if anybody's there to sell you likes and followers, all that, don't do it. It might get you banned, and if anything, it'll just tarnish your reputation. Because people will look at you and be like, oh wow, he has 1 million or 100,000 followers.
Our listeners, can you just unpack it? Let's just back up. So I think it's important you explain what we're actually talking about. You're talking about like a bot farm, a click farm. You're talking about like buying followers, buying engagement online. So can you just maybe unpack what that is and why people do it and why it's a mistake?
Yeah. So mainly so I get a lot of these messages, and basically what they look like is it's somebody from some other part of the world saying, hey, pay $5 for 100 followers, $10 for 1,000, $20 for 10,000, blah, blah. They basically are offering you either followers, likes, engagement, things like that. And I've talked to somebody that actually did that, and they actually got no results. So some people actually may just be gypping you and just take your money and go. But some of them actually do get you those followers. But what happens though is contractors are trying to they do this because they feel like it's going to give them more credibility. But
More
what
clout.
actually ends up happening is they could get banned. Two, if people begin to notice that you bought your followers or things like that, you're going to tarnish your brand. And then three, like, even if you have 10,000 followers, those aren't actual real people. So what's the point in posting and reaching people that are bots or all, like actual fake followers? So yeah, so that's kind of the way I would break it down from my end.
Well, it actually hurts you because if the algorithm sees that you have a massive number of followers and no engagement, then they basically just say, okay, these are all fake. This is not a real account. They'll actually de-rank you. So it actually totally backfires. Okay, this is the last question on the strategy and probably the most important. We should get to it now. And it is how. So I guess my follow-up questions is like who should be responsible for these posts, for executing this strategy inside the context of a contracting business? How do we operationalize the content capture as much as possible? Where do we store the assets even? It was like Google Drive, like where do you put the pictures that get taken or the videos that we film? Stuff like that. So let's just talk about the how.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, basically I have two options. You have one, you can hire somebody in-house, whether it's a marketing coordinator, social media coordinator, all that sort of stuff, and I would lean more that route versus just having an admin or some random person handle it, because that will typically lead to not the greatest content. So yeah, either hiring in-house or outsourcing to a social media agency that has experience in. Here's the caveat I'll add to that is a construction specific social media agency. I just talked to a contractor 2 days ago. They have a marketing agency that they're working with that isn't construction specific. And he said it's an absolute nightmare because they're having to learn the industry. They're having to learn the lingo. They're having to basically they have to this owner has to feed them all the information, and they can't hit the ground running themselves because they don't know anything about the industry. So if you want to make your life easier, don't just Google social media agency and find whoever it is you feel like can do it, because it will lead to very templatized, boring content. More specifically, try to find a company that can actually help you that's construction specific or home service space specific. That way they give you the most tailored solution possible.
Okay, good advice. But you're saying the more permanent solution is to hire this in-house. And I would say you need to be kind of scaled up to be able to afford that. I think in most instances, a lot of our listeners will be doing this. They will be giving this to an administrator, a coordinator, perhaps another marketing manager who has a more broad role, and then they're doing social media off the side of their desk. What is the secret to getting? Because here's the thing, I've done this where I'm like, hey, take before and after photos, and nobody does it. Like, do you have any secret sauce around just like making sure the actual content gets captured?
Yeah, so there's honestly there's only two ways. One of them is like you hire a photographer or some sort of just individual that does media, whether it's photo or video, and have them come out to sites, whether it's regularly or at the end of the project. That's one. The other thing though is if you have an actual process in place, like whether it's a mobilization process or demob, like, hey, at the end of a project, closeout process, adding it saying, hey, superintendent or project manager will capture photos, blah, blah, blah. So I think those are kind of the two options that contractors have. Because otherwise, if you just ask a random person and there's no process in place for this, you're likely going to get the outcome that you mentioned is not get any content at all.
I would actually shout out to, there's a really good tool. They're partners of ours. Company Cam is really, really handy for this. I mean, it's actually designed to help with job site communication and help crews talk to their foremans and foremans talk to the office and everyone talk to the customers. It's a really, really intuitive tool. But the other sort of secondary benefit, because it wasn't built, I don't think, as a social media, facilitator or enabler. But the other benefit is you have all your job site photos in one place, and it's very, very easy to just pull stuff based on the address. And so it's very cheap app, just not expensive to get on. Company Cam would make this very, very easy. Dude, we are all out of time here, but tell us a little bit about customer growth and kind of your story, what you're up to, where people can connect with you.
Yeah, so customer growth. So I run a social media agency working with construction companies to be able to help them build their brand online. You got an essence as far as my framework and my approach. As far as connecting with me, I am super active on LinkedIn. So if you're not connected with me there, feel free to connect with me there. I post tons of content, tips, and things like that, strategy, education, different stories, things that just will honestly help you level up your business, regardless of if you do business with me or not. And so those are the only two things I would plug. Is if you want to learn more, go to customergrowth.co or check me out on LinkedIn.
Cool. Thank you for this, man. Super enlightening. Gives us a very, very easy to follow framework. And I hope our listeners take it and run with it. Appreciate the time, Jonathan.
Thanks, Benji.
Thanks so much for watching this episode of Contractor Evolution. If you've already subscribed to our channel, consider sharing this episode with another contractor who you think needs to hear it.